June 5, 1944. Bunker 17, Atlantic Wall Defences, Normandy Coast, France. Hauptmann Werner Müller of the 352nd Infantry Division stood atop the concrete observation post, his field glasses trained on the darkening sea. Rain drizzled down his neck as the wind carried the scent of salt and wet earth. The weather had turned foul, which meant the anticipated Allied invasion would likely be postponed yet again. Perfect, he thought. More time to fortify our positions while they hesitate. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What Müller could not know was that in less than 24 hours, his entire understanding of warfare, industry, and American resolve would be shattered like the concrete bunkers he believed impregnable. "Americans are soft," Müller declared to the gathered officers in the command bunker that evening. "They've grown fat on luxury and consumption. They have no stomach for a real fight." Oberleutnant Karl Hoffmann nodded in agreement, while meticulously cleaning his Walter P-38. "My cousin fought them in Italy. Says they panic when things don't go to plan. Too dependent on their equipment, which frequently breaks down," added Lieutenant Friedrich Weber, the youngest of the three at just 22. "German engineering versus American mass production. Quality will always triumph over quantity." Müller spread a map across the wooden table, weighted at the corners with spent shell casings. "Intelligence reports their troops average just 8 weeks of combat training. 8 weeks! Our men trained for years. Their officers are businessmen and lawyers given rushed commissions. They've never known true hardship." The bunker was sparse but functional. Reinforced concrete walls lined with communication equipment, ammunition crates serving as makeshift furniture, and a single light bulb casting harsh shadows. The air hung heavy with cigarette smoke and the lingering aroma of cabbage soup from dinner. "Consider their society," Müller continued, warming to his subject. "They've had it easy since their founding. No real wars on their soil since their civil war. No bombed cities, no food shortages, just consumption and comfort." Hoffmann took a long drag of his cigarette. "Their troops expect hot meals and showers. Ours expect victory or death." "Precisely why we'll hold this wall," Müller said, tracing the fortified coastline on the map with his finger. "Field Marshal Rommel has turned this coast into the greatest defensive system in military history. Over 15,000 concrete fortifications, nearly 6 million mines, artillery pre-sighted on every possible landing zone." The statistics were impressive, and they provided comfort to the men gathered in the bunker. The Atlantic Wall stretched 400 miles from Norway to the Spanish border, with the heaviest fortifications concentrated along the likely invasion beaches. "And if they do come," Weber added, "our panzer divisions will drive them back into the sea. The 21st is just inland, with 127 tanks ready to counterattack." Müller did not mention that many of these were older models, or that fuel shortages had limited training exercises. Such concerns were unnecessary. The German soldiers' superiority would compensate for any material deficiencies. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the bunker's concrete roof. The coastline defences had been Müller's home for 11 months. At 34, he had already experienced the stunning victories of 1939 to 1941 and the grinding reversals in Russia. But he remained confident in final victory. The Führer had promised secret weapons that would turn the tide. The Western Allies would tire of casualties. The German soldier would prove superior, as he always had. "Get some rest," Müller ordered. "Tomorrow we continue strengthening the dragon's teeth on the beach approaches." As his men departed, Müller studied the intelligence reports one final time. The Americans had raised over 90 divisions since entering the war. An impressive number, but numbers alone didn't win wars. Spirit, determination, and tactical skill did, qualities the German army possessed in abundance. He extinguished the light and settled onto his narrow cot, Sleep came quickly to a man certain of his place in the world and the rightness of his convictions. At 01:30 hours, Müller was jolted awake by the sound of aircraft, hundreds of them, their engines forming a continuous roar overhead. He rushed to the communications center, where the radio operator was frantically working the equipment. "Paratroopers, Herr Hauptmann, American and British, dropping inland." The invasion had begun, but not as expected. Not from the sea first, but from the sky. Reports flooded in from across Normandy, paratroopers landing behind coastal defenses, gliders delivering troops and light equipment, chaos spreading throughout the rear areas. "Order all units to combat readiness," Müller commanded. "Alert the divisional headquarters. This could be a diversion before the main assault." As dawn approached on June 6th, the horizon revealed a sight that would forever alter Müller's understanding of industrial warfare. The sea was no longer visible. Where water had been now stretched a vast armada of ships, destroyers, cruisers, troop transports, landing craft, extending to the horizon in every direction. "Mein Gott," whispered Weber, who had joined Müller at the observation post. "How many?" Müller could not answer immediately. His mind struggled to process the scale of what he was seeing. "Thousands," he finally managed. "At least 5,000 vessels." The actual number was closer to 7,000, the largest amphibious invasion force ever assembled. Nearly 200,000 sailors manned this floating city that had materialized overnight. The logistical achievement alone was staggering. Before Müller could fully comprehend this sight, the naval bombardment began. Hundreds of ships opened fire simultaneously. The noise was beyond anything he had experienced, even in Russia. The earth itself seemed to tremble as shells screamed overhead and explosions blossomed along the coastline. "Take cover!" he shouted, pulling Weber down as their observation post was showered with debris from a near miss. They scrambled back to the command bunker, where communications were rapidly deteriorating. Reports indicated landings along 5 beaches, code-named Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The 352nd sector included Omaha, where American forces were landing directly into their fields of fire. "They're getting slaughtered at Omaha," reported the radio operator. "Our gun emplacements have clear fields of fire. The first wave is nearly wiped out." This news restored some of Müller's confidence. The defenses were working as designed. Perhaps the Atlantic Wall would hold after all. But hour after hour, the Americans kept coming. When one landing craft was destroyed, 5 more appeared. Their naval guns systematically targeted German positions with devastating accuracy. When a bunker fell silent, aircraft appeared overhead to bomb any visible counterattack. By mid-morning, the situation had grown critical. American forces were pushing inland from Utah Beach with surprising speed. British and Canadian troops were making progress from their landing zones. Only at Omaha did the defense seem to be holding. "Where are our aircraft?" demanded Hoffmann, his uniform covered in concrete dust from near misses. "The Luftwaffe should be strafing those beaches." "There are reports of fighter squadrons mobilizing from fields near Caen," Müller answered, knowing it was likely false hope. The Luftwaffe had been decimated by years of combat and fuel shortages. The skies belonged to the Allies now, a fact demonstrated by the hundreds of fighters and bombers that roared overhead, unchallenged. At 1300 hours, the bunker's communication system crackled with an urgent message from regimental headquarters. "Enemy breakthrough at Omaha, multiple penetrations of coastal defenses. All units prepare for counterattack or strategic withdrawal." Müller could scarcely believe it. Omaha Beach had the strongest natural defenses, high bluffs overlooking a narrow beach, every approach covered by interlocking fields of fire. Yet somehow the Americans had pushed through. "They should have broken," he muttered. "The casualties they've taken. They should have turned back." Weber, who had been observing through a damaged embrasure, turned to Müller with a changed expression. "Herr Hauptmann, you need to see this." Müller joined him at the opening. The sight below defied comprehension. The beach was transformed into a massive logistical operation. Hundreds of landing craft shuttled between ships and shore. Bulldozers cleared obstacles. Temporary piers were being constructed. Supply dumps grew larger by the minute. And everywhere, American soldiers, those supposedly soft, undertrained civilians in uniform, moved with purpose and determination despite heavy casualties. "How is this possible?" Weber asked, his voice barely audible over the continuing bombardment. "How can they replace losses so quickly?" Müller had no answer that made sense within his existing worldview. The Americans were sustaining casualties that would have halted any European army, yet they continued advancing. For every soldier who fell, 3 more appeared to take his place. For every vehicle destroyed, 5 more landed on the beach. By late afternoon, the situation had become untenable. Their bunker was now dangerously close to the front line as American forces pushed inland. Communications with higher headquarters were sporadic. The promised Panzer counterattack had not materialized. Allied aircraft had targeted every road and junction, making large-scale movement impossible. "We need to withdraw to the secondary defensive line," Müller finally ordered. "Gather essential equipment and destroy everything else." As his men prepared to abandon the bunker that had been their home for nearly a year, Müller took a final look through his field glasses at the invasion force. The horizon remained filled with ships. New vessels arrived to replace those that had already unloaded. The scale of material wealth required to sustain such an operation was beyond anything he had imagined possible. The withdrawal quickly became disorganized. Allied aircraft targeted any movement. Artillery fire seemed to track them with uncanny precision. By nightfall, Müller's company had been reduced to 47 effective fighters from an original strength of 165. They established a defensive position in a small Norman village 10 kilometers inland. The stone buildings offered some protection, but ammunition was running low and no resupply was forthcoming. "Set up the machine guns to cover the main approaches," Müller ordered. "Conserve ammunition. Fire only when targets are confirmed." In the village church, now serving as an aid station, Müller encountered Generalleutnant Dietrich Kraus, the divisional artillery commander, being treated for a shrapnel wound. "Herr General, what news from division?" Müller asked after the customary salute. Kraus looked up with exhausted eyes. "Division exists mostly on paper now, Hauptmann. Communications are shattered, units are isolated and fighting independently. The Americans have landed more tanks in one day than we have in the entire sector." "And the counterattack? The 21st Panzer?" "Scattered. Allied air power has interdicted every major road. They've dropped so many bombs that some highways are completely impassable. I counted over 300 fighter bombers in 1 hour. 300! Where are they getting the planes, the fuel, the pilots?" The question was rhetorical, but it struck at the heart of Müller's unraveling certainties. That night, huddled in the damaged church, Müller wrote in his field journal by candlelight, June 6, 1944, "The Americans have created something unprecedented in warfare, not merely an invasion force, but a mobile industrial complex that floats on water. They do not respond to losses as we do. Where we must carefully husband resources, they expend them lavishly. Their artillery fires more shells in 1 hour than we can allocate in a week. Their aircraft appear in endless waves. Most disturbing is the resolve of their infantry. These supposedly soft civilians in uniform advance, despite casualties that would halt our most fanatical units. Have we fundamentally misunderstood our enemy?" The following morning brought no respite. American forces continued their advance, methodically clearing villages and establishing supply lines. Müller ordered his remaining men to fall back again, hoping to link up with other German units forming a new defensive line. During this withdrawal, they captured an American officer, Captain James Donovan of the 1st Infantry Division. Rather than the arrogant or broken man Müller expected, Donovan was calm and professional even in captivity. "You're making a mistake staying here, Captain," Donovan said, as Müller interrogated him in a damaged farmhouse. "Every hour, 5,000 more American soldiers land in Normandy. Every day, hundreds more tanks, guns, and vehicles. You can't stop what's coming." "Propaganda," Müller replied, though without conviction. "Facts, Captain. My division trained for this invasion for 11 months in England, every contingency planned for, every scenario rehearsed, and we're just one division of many." "Your casualties have been enormous," Müller countered. Donovan's expression remained unchanged. "We expected that. We planned for 30% losses in the first wave. The difference is we can replace our losses. Can you?" Before Müller could respond, an American artillery barrage began landing nearby. The precision was remarkable, each shell landing within 20 meters of their position without a single ranging shot. "How are they targeting so accurately?" Weber asked as they took cover. Donovan smiled slightly. "New proximity fuses in our shells, radio-controlled, detonate at the optimal height automatically. We're producing 40,000 of them per day back home." Müller stared at the American. "Per day? 40,000? Detroit's not making cars anymore, Captain. Just war materials. Ford's Willow Run plant assembles a complete B-24 bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. That's just one factory." The numbers were so outlandish that Müller would have dismissed them as obvious lies had he not witnessed the endless fleet off Normandy. A complete 4-engine bomber every hour? The entire German aviation industry couldn't match that output in a week. As the barrage lifted, Müller made a decision that contradicted his training and indoctrination. He would not report the captured officer. Instead, he needed to understand the enemy he was facing. "You were a civilian before the war?" he asked Donovan. "History teacher, high school in Pennsylvania. And now you lead men in combat after just 8 weeks of training." Donovan laughed. "Is that what your intelligence reports say? 8 weeks? I've had 14 months of officer training. Every platoon leader in my company has a college education. My sergeants have been with me through North Africa and Sicily. We learn fast." Over the next hours, as they continued their withdrawal toward Carentan, Müller's worldview continued to fracture. Donovan described an America that bore little resemblance to the decadent, disorganized society depicted in German propaganda. "We've built 17 major shipyards since Pearl Harbor," Donovan explained during a brief rest. "Each can produce a Liberty ship in under 2 weeks. That's a complete 10,000-ton cargo vessel. We're launching 3 ships every day." "Impossible," interjected Hoffman, who was guarding the American. "No nation has that capacity." "The SS Robert E. Peary was built in 4 days, 15 hours. Donovan continued calmly. "From keel laying to launch. It's in the newspapers. We make a public celebration of production milestones." Müller found himself believing the American despite himself. The evidence was undeniable. It floated off the Normandy coast and flew overhead in formations of hundreds. Their conversation was interrupted by the distinctive sound of American Sherman tanks approaching. Müller's reduced company was in no position to offer resistance. "You have a choice, Captain," Donovan said quietly. "Surrender now, or watch your men die for no purpose." It was the ultimate test of Müller's changing perspective. The Werner Müller of June 5th would have ordered resistance to the last man, believing it his duty. The Müller of June 7th, who had seen the true face of American industrial might, made a different calculation. "Prepare white flags," he ordered. "We're surrendering." Hoffman looked shocked. "Herr Hauptmann, we cannot win this fight," Müller interrupted. "Not here, not tomorrow, not ever. Look around you, Karl. We have 3 machine guns and diminishing ammunition. They have replaced an entire division's worth of equipment in 48 hours. The surrender was conducted with surprising dignity. American soldiers, those supposedly untrained civilians, operated with professional efficiency. Prisoners were treated correctly, given medical attention, food, and water before being transported to the rear. At the temporary prisoner collection point, Müller encountered a sight that completed his transformation. Stretching along a makeshift road leading from the beach were trucks, hundreds upon hundreds in a continuous line. They carried ammunition, fuel, rations, medical supplies, spare parts, and fresh troops. The convoy seemed endless, a physical manifestation of an industrial capacity beyond comprehension. Nearby, engineers were constructing a temporary harbour, concrete caissons larger than apartment buildings being sunk to create breakwaters, prefabricated piers extending into the sea, cranes assembling themselves like giant mechanical creatures. "Mulberry Harbours," explained the American sergeant processing Müller's prisoner documentation. "We brought our ports with us, since we figured you'd demolish the existing ones." "You built floating ports?" Müller asked incredulously. "Sure did. Took 'em apart in England, floated 'em over, putting 'em back together now. Be unloading 5,000 tons of supplies daily by tomorrow." That evening, in the prisoner compound that already held over 2,000 German soldiers, Müller sat with Hoffmann and Weber as American C-47 transport planes roared overhead, dropping supplies to troops still fighting inland. "I don't understand," Weber said quietly. "How did we misjudge them so completely?" Müller watched the endless aerial procession. "We believed our own propaganda. We saw what we wanted to see. A soft, decadent society incapable of sacrifice or sustained effort. We were catastrophically wrong." "Their individual soldiers are still not our equal," Hoffmann insisted, clinging to some remnant of his former certainty. "Their individual soldiers don't need to be our equal," Müller replied. That American captain wasn't exaggerating. "They're producing more in a month than we can in a year. This isn't a battle of individual quality anymore. It's multiplication against division." As darkness fell over Normandy, more ships appeared on the horizon, a second wave of the invasion force arriving to reinforce success. Distant thunder marked the front line, pushing steadily inland as German resistance crumbled against the weight of American material superiority. 3 weeks later, now in a permanent prisoner camp in England, Müller received permission to write to his family. After assurances of his health and safety, he included an observation that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. "What I have witnessed cannot be explained within our understanding of warfare. The Americans have created not just an army, but a mobile industrial system that projects factories across oceans. Their strength is not in their fighting spirit, though that has proven greater than we expected. Their strength is in their ability to replace losses instantly, to expend resources without concern, to bring the productivity of an entire continent to bear on a single beach in Normandy. Against such capacity, tactical excellence and individual heroism are insufficient. We face not just an enemy army, but an enemy economy that has transformed itself entirely for war production. I fear the outcome is now inevitable." In August 1944, as Allied forces liberated Paris and pushed toward Germany itself, Müller was transferred to a prisoner camp in Oklahoma. The journey provided final confirmation of his transformed understanding. The America he saw through the train windows bore no resemblance to the weak, chaotic society described in Nazi propaganda. Factories sprawled across landscapes, working around the clock. Newly constructed airfields housed thousands of aircraft. Train yards contained more locomotives and rolling stock than existed in all of occupied Europe. And everywhere, production. Endless, methodical, overwhelming production. Not the frenzied last efforts of a desperate nation, but the measured output of a society operating well within its capacity. At the Oklahoma camp, Prisoners were housed in comfortable barracks, given adequate food, medical care, and even educational opportunities. The contrast with Russian captivity, as described by the few who had escaped it, was stark. "Why treat us so well?" Hoffman asked an American guard one day. "We are your enemies." The guard, a middle-aged Oklahoma farmer drafted in 1943, shrugged. "Got no reason not to. We got plenty of everything. Besides, war'll be over soon enough. Then you'll go home and remember how you were treated." This casual confidence, not arrogance but simple certainty based on observable fact, was perhaps the most telling indicator of America's true strength. They harbored no doubt about the outcome, because the industrial mathematics made any other result impossible. In May 1945, when news of Germany's surrender reached the camp, Müller felt not despair, but a complex relief. The inevitable had occurred. The war that could not be won was finally over. That evening, he completed the journal he had maintained throughout his captivity with a final entry. History will record many causes for Germany's defeat, but the fundamental reason is simpler than most realize. We could never have won a war of attrition against the United States. The productive capacity we witnessed off Normandy rendered our tactical advantages meaningless. While we measured success by territory gained and casualties inflicted, they measured it in ships launched, aircraft built, and supplies delivered. Our leadership failed to recognize that modern warfare has become as much an industrial contest as a military one. The America I have witnessed in captivity is not the America described in our propaganda. It is not soft or decadent, but pragmatic and overwhelmingly productive. Their secret weapon was not some miracle technology, but the application of mass production techniques to every aspect of war. Against such capability, our defeat was not just probable, but mathematically certain from the moment they fully entered the conflict. After the war, Müller returned to Germany in 1947. He found a country transformed, cities reduced to rubble, industry dismantled, society fundamentally altered, yet reconstruction was already beginning, guided in the western zones by the same American productive efficiency he had witnessed in wartime. In 1955, now a history teacher in Hamburg, Müller took his students to the port, where American cargo vessels were unloading machinery for German factories under the Marshall Plan. "This is how wars are truly won," he told them, as cranes lifted equipment from the ship's holds. "Not just by defeating an enemy on the battlefield, but by demonstrating a better way forward afterward." The America I encountered was capable of producing 7,000 ships for a single invasion. Now they produce reconstruction equipment for their former enemies. One student raised his hand. "Professor Müller, if their industrial capacity was so superior, why did the invasion at Normandy still require such difficult fighting? Why not simply overwhelm the defenses immediately?" Müller considered the question carefully. "Because production alone is insufficient. Courage, tactical skill, and sacrifice are still essential. The Americans possessed material superiority, yes, but they still needed the resolve to face our defenses and the skill to overcome them. What made their victory inevitable was the combination, industrial might alongside human determination. Had either element been missing, the outcome might have been different." As the years passed, Müller occasionally encountered former comrades who clung to myths about the war, that Germany could have won with different strategies or leadership, that some decisive battle might have changed the outcome. He no longer engaged in such discussions. His experience at Normandy had taught him an irrefutable lesson about modern warfare that no tactical argument could counter. The mathematical reality remained. America had produced 400 aircraft during the war to Germany's 907. They had built 100 naval vessels to Germany's 156. They had manufactured 86, 330 tanks to Germany's 26, 860. By 1944, they were producing more military equipment than all Axis powers combined, while simultaneously supplying the Soviet Union and Great Britain. What Müller had witnessed from his bunker on June 6, 1944, those 7,000 ships stretching to the horizon, was not merely an invasion force. It was the physical manifestation of an industrial colossus that had fundamentally changed the nature of warfare forever. The Wehrmacht officer who had confidently proclaimed, "Americans are soft," had been correct about one thing. The decisive factor in modern warfare was not primarily the qualities of individual soldiers, but he had catastrophically misjudged which factors would actually determine victory. The lesson of Normandy was clear. In the industrial age, wars are won as much in factories as on battlefields. No amount of tactical brilliance could compensate for the simple mathematics of American production. This was the revelation that came to Werner Müller as he watched 7,000 ships materialize off the coast of France, a lesson in industrial warfare he would never forget. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.